Have you ever experienced the sensation that your vitality carries an overwhelming force for this world to contain? That something dwells within you which others struggle to bear, yet you cannot quite articulate what it might be? This sensation holds genuine truth. It represents the initial tremor of recognizing something that Carl Jung would identify as your psychological rarity, a force that was never designed to conform to collective frameworks. At this very moment, as these words reach your awareness, something within your being understands that your purpose here transcends mere adaptation. Your purpose involves finally witnessing the true nature of your existence. Certain individuals experience a sense of alienation within their own existence from their earliest years. This stems not from any inherent flaw, but rather from the fact that their internal resonance fails to harmonize with the majority. This incompatibility does not arise from past wounds or conscious decisions. It represents a configuration of the soul that entered this world carrying an intensity which collective consciousness cannot embrace without experiencing fear. When you finally recognize your uncommon nature, external validation will not provide the relief you seek. You will discover something more profound, an internal certainty that no longer requires permission from anyone. However, before reaching this understanding, something fundamental must occur. A quiet transformation must take place. One that will remain invisible to others, yet will resonate through every cell of your physical form. Jung understood that certain people carry within themselves psychic energy of a different density. This concerns not superiority, but rather a distinction in vibration. The force you carry within does not operate according to standard flows. It possesses too much depth, too much substance, too much authenticity for systems built upon superficiality and predictability. Throughout your entire existence, you have attempted to adjust your resonance to match others. You diminished your brightness to avoid blinding anyone. You concealed your depth to prevent causing alarm. Yet each such concealment cost you vital force. And now, perhaps for the first time, you begin to comprehend that your difference does not constitute a defect. It represents a resonance. Do you recall the moment when you first sensed the necessity to hide yourself? Perhaps it occurred during childhood, when your intensity provoked unease in adults. Perhaps later, when you notice that your presence destabilizes others, even when you take no action. People possessing rare vitality learn early that their very existence weighs too heavily upon the world. Not because they display aggression or dominance, quite the contrary, because their sensitivity sharpens to such a degree that it detects what remains hidden. Their perception deepens to such an extent that it destabilizes systems founded on denial, and their authenticity proves so genuine that it removes the masks others wear, even without words being spoken. So you learn to disappear. You learn to become a diminished version of yourself, and for years you believed this represented the only path to survival. Perhaps you once believed that if you could just remain sufficiently quiet, sufficiently small, sufficiently invisible, then finally you would find safety. But the security you found in concealment proved false. It was not protection, it was imprisonment. And now, after so many years of living within this confinement, you begin to understand that the door was never actually locked. You simply lacked the courage to open it, because on the other side of that door waited a truth you spent your entire life avoiding. The truth that your vitality carries too much power to hide, too much vibrancy to suppress, too much authenticity to deny. Jung described a phenomenon he termed the reversed complex of inadequacy. This is not the complex of someone who feels too small. This is the complex of someone who was punished for being too expansive, for possessing too much, for perceiving too much, for feeling too much. This complex does not originate from lack of worth, but from an internal awareness that your intensity poses a threat to the collective slumber. The people surrounding you did not reject you because you lacked worthiness for affection. They rejected you because your presence demanded that they awaken, and most people prefer to remain asleep. So you began wearing a facade, not because you wished to deceive, but because you wished to survive. Jung called this facade the persona. It is the social identity we adopt to function within collective structures. The persona serves a necessary purpose. Without it, we could not coexist with others. But for people possessing rare vitality, the persona becomes something beyond a social tool. It becomes a prison. Your facade grew so thick that you began forgetting what lay beneath it. You performed normality with perfection. You smiled at the appropriate moments. You fell silent when your truth proved too uncomfortable. You adjusted your presence to match whatever room you occupied. And you did this for so long that at a certain point you ceased knowing where the facade ended and your genuine self began. This was not conscious deception, it was a survival strategy. But the body remembers. Even if the mind has forgotten, the body still knows what was hidden. Persistent exhaustion, inability to sleep, strange discomfort without medical explanation, the sensation of living in a body that does not quite belong to you. These are not random symptoms. This is the language of your soul, crying out through physical matter. The persona is not merely a psychological construct. It manifests in the body as tension, as blockage, as continuous depletion of vital force. Because when you live behind a facade, your genuine self expends enormous quantities of psychic energy, merely to remain hidden. Your body communicates something to you that your mind is not yet prepared to hear. It tells you that the time has arrived to remove the facade, not because you possess sufficient strength, but because you can no longer live in denial. When the facade begins to crack, you do not feel relief, you feel terror. Because throughout your entire existence you believed that your genuine vitality was unacceptable, that if you revealed who you truly are, you would face permanent rejection. But the truth differs. When the persona begins to disintegrate, this is not the end. This is the beginning. This is the moment when your soul declares that you have performed for others long enough. Now the time has come for you to live for yourself. The dissolution of the persona does not constitute failure. It represents liberation. But this liberation requires something most people are not prepared to give. It requires that you stand face to face with who you truly are. And this terrifies, because what if you discover that what you concealed is too strange, too intense, too different to be accepted? A moment exists in the process of recognition when you realize that your vitality has always attracted extreme reactions. You were never ignored. People either adored you or rejected you, either wished to be close to you or fled. This polarization was not accidental. Jung spoke of projection, of how people cast their own unconscious contents onto others, and people with rare vitality serve as projection screens par excellence. Your intensity awakens in others their own hidden desires and fears. They perceive in you what they themselves fear or secretly desire, and they react not to you, but to their own interior, reflected in your presence. But there is something you do not yet know. Your rarity is not accidental. Jung spoke of the process of individuation, the path on which you cease being who you were supposed to be according to others, and become who you have always been according to your own soul. This is not the construction of a new identity. This is the removal of layers of false identities that family, culture, educational systems, and society placed upon you. Beneath these layers there is no emptiness. There is your genuine self, your true being, what Jung termed the unique core of your existence, which existed even before you learned to speak, even before anyone told you who you should be. Your rarity is not something you must acquire. It is something you must uncover beneath the ruins of others' expectations. What if I told you that your vitality was never the problem? The problem was a world constructed around fear of intensity, around suppression of depth, around punishment of those who refused to fit into predetermined patterns. Your existence was never too much. The world was simply too small, too fearful, too invested in maintaining its sleeping state to accommodate someone who refuses to dream. And now that you begin to see this, everything shifts. You no longer interpret your intensity as a burden to be managed. You begin to see it as a gift that was never meant for everyone, only for those prepared to receive it without attempting to diminish it. The process of recognizing your rarity does not conclude with a single revelation. It unfolds as a series of small awakenings, each one dismantling another layer of falsehood you constructed around yourself. And with each layer that falls, you become lighter. Not because you lose something, but because you cease carrying the weight of pretending to be someone you never were. Jung spoke of the shadow, the part of yourself you rejected because it seemed unacceptable. But what if your shadow does not contain only darkness? What if it holds the very intensity you were taught to hide, the vitality you learned to suppress, the perception you trained yourself to ignore? Your shadow is not your enemy. It is the guardian of your authenticity, waiting for the moment when you possess enough courage to reclaim what you abandoned for the sake of acceptance. When you begin integrating your shadow, when you begin retrieving the pieces of yourself you scattered throughout your life to please others, something remarkable occurs. You cease needing validation from those who never understood you. You cease explaining yourself to people who lack the capacity to comprehend. You cease apologizing for your existence. And in this cessation, you discover a freedom you never knew existed. The freedom to simply exist without permission, without justification, without making yourself smaller to accommodate others' discomfort. This freedom does not arrive through rebellion or aggression. It arrives through quiet certainty, the certainty that you possess the right to occupy space in this world exactly as you are, without alteration, without apology, without compromise. Jung understood that people who complete the individuation process undergo a fundamental shift in how they relate to the world. They cease deriving their sense of self from external sources. They cease requiring the world to affirm their worth. They discover an internal anchor so deep that no external storm can shake it. This does not mean they become isolated or disconnected. It means they connect from a place of wholeness rather than emptiness, from abundance rather than need. And this changes the nature of every relationship they form. People can sense this shift, even if they cannot articulate it. They recognize that you are no longer available for the games you once played, no longer willing to diminish yourself for their comfort, no longer seeking their approval to validate your existence. Some will respect this, others will resent it, and both responses reveal more about them than about you. The world does not always reward authenticity. It often punishes it, especially when that authenticity challenges the collective agreements about how life should be lived. But here is what you are beginning to understand. The punishment of living inauthentically exceeds any consequence the world can impose for living truthfully. Because when you betray yourself, when you suppress your nature, when you hide your light, you do not just lose connection with others, you lose connection with yourself. And that loss, that disconnection from your own essence, creates a suffering no external validation can heal. So you make a choice. Not a dramatic choice, not a visible choice, but a quiet, internal choice. You choose yourself, you choose your truth. You choose to stop abandoning the very essence of who you are for the comfort of those who were never going to understand anyway. This choice does not mean you become harsh or closed. It means you become discerning. You recognize that your presence, your vitality, your depth are resources too precious to offer to everyone. You begin to understand that not every person deserves access to your inner world, not because they are unworthy as human beings, but because they lack the capacity or willingness to honor what you share. And this is not cruelty, this is wisdom. The wisdom of knowing that preservation of your authenticity requires boundaries, requires selectivity, requires the courage to say no to connections that demand you become someone other than who you are. When you finally stop trying to be understood by everyone, when you finally accept that your rarity means you will never belong in conventional spaces, something unexpected happens. You begin attracting beings who have always been waiting for you. There is no mystical force at work in an esoteric sense. This is simply the law of resonance. Vitality attracts vitality. Truth attracts truth. And when you cease lying about who you are, the world ceases sending you people who can only embrace you when you pretend to be someone else. But there are also losses. The identities you wore for years begin to disintegrate, not because you make conscious decisions to abandon them. They simply become irrelevant. The role you played in your family, the image you maintained at work, the expectations you attempted to fulfill, all of this begins to fall away like old clothing that no longer fits. Jung called this symbolic death. This is not physical death, but the death of the false self you constructed to survive. And though this sounds liberating, this process is also painful, because those identities provided you with a sense of security, even if they were lies. And now, you must learn to live without that false certainty. You must learn to stand in your truth without leaning on anything external. And this is precisely where most people retreat. This is precisely where they say they prefer to return to what is familiar, but you cannot. Something within you has crossed over, a point of no return. The door to your old existence has closed, and the key has been burned. You can no longer pretend. You can no longer diminish yourself. You can no longer wear the facade that was heavy as armor. And though this is terrifying, there is also a strange relief in it. The relief that you can finally stop. Stop trying, stop fighting, stop proving. Simply exist in your full, untamed, rare vitality. Jung said that individuation does not mean becoming someone new. It means becoming who you always were, but whom you were not permitted to be. This distinction is crucial. You are not creating a new identity. You are discovering an ancient identity that was always there, buried beneath layers of adaptation. The self that existed before you learned to feel shame about your intensity, before you learned to hide your perception, before you learned that your presence was too much. This self is your true being. And now, for the first time in your existence, it is not hiding in shadow. It is emerging into light. Not aggressively, not demonstratively, quietly, but unstoppably. What does it mean to live from recognized rarity? It means you cease needing crowds. You cease needing constant companionship. You cease needing everyone to understand you because you finally understand yourself. And this internal certainty proves stronger than any external validation. The people around you may notice the change. They may say you have become more distant, less available, harder to read, and they will be correct. But this is not coldness. This is a boundary that declares that your vitality is precious. You will no longer give it to everyone. You will give it only to those who know how to receive it without attempting to change it. There is a paradoxical freedom in this. The less you need to prove your rarity, the more obvious it becomes. You need not speak of your transformation. You need not explain your journey. People will sense it, or they will not. And both outcomes are acceptable, because your worth no longer depends on anyone's perception. Your worth is inherent. It is part of your soul's configuration. And now that you know this, no one can take it from you. You may lose everything external, but this internal certainty can no longer be taken from you. Some people will attempt to pull you back to your old version. They will say you have changed, that you are no longer the same person, and they will be correct. You are not. But their discomfort with your transformation is not your problem to solve. You cannot diminish yourself for their peace. You already tried that. It nearly destroyed you. So now, when someone says you are different, you can simply acknowledge it and say, yes, you are. And you need not add anything more. You need not explain yourself. You need not apologize for your existence. Your transformation requires no defense. It requires only your presence within it. According to Jung, people who have passed through the individuation process carry within themselves a particular kind of authority. This is not the authority of position or power. This is the authority of essence. People sense it, even if they cannot name it. Your presence becomes stabilizing for those who are ready, and destabilizing for those who still sleep. You need not do anything. You simply exist. And this existence possesses a power you did not know before, because now your vitality flows from your true being, not from your constructed self, from the center, not from the periphery, from truth, not from a facade. Silence becomes your natural environment, not the silence of emptiness, but the silence of fullness. Silence in which you can hear your own voice without interference. Jung said that those who truly know their essence no longer need to speak too much, because their presence speaks for them. Your existence becomes your message. The way you move, breathe, look at the world. All of this communicates your internal truth louder than any words. And this is power that cannot be taken from you, because it does not come from outside. It comes from your interior. You may have noticed that time began to flow differently. You no longer rush so much. You no longer chase anything. You no longer try to outrun your own existence. You live in your own rhythm. And your rhythm differs from the rhythm of the majority. Slower in some places, more intense in others, but always authentic, always yours. And in this rhythm, there is peace you did not know before. This is not the peace of inactivity. This is the peace of alignment. Alignment of your external existence with your internal essence. People who carry rare vitality often feel that their existence lacks meaning in the conventional understanding. They do not possess impressive careers, loud successes, grand achievements they could display to the world. And for years this troubled you. You thought something was wrong with you, that you should achieve more, build more, prove more. But now you begin to understand that your worth does not lie in what you do. It lies in who you are. Your presence in this world is your contribution, the way you hold space for truth, the way you refuse to succumb to pressure to be someone else. This is your work, and it is work that most people lack the courage to undertake. Your transformation is not for everyone. Most people will never understand why you cannot simply return to your old version, why you cannot simply be lighter, simpler, easier. But you know there is no return. You know the door behind you has closed. And though this is sometimes lonely, there is also deep integrity in it. You did not betray yourself for acceptance. You did not sell your soul for belonging. You remained faithful to your essence, and this requires greater courage than most people will ever need to possess. There is something I want you to know. This transformation you are undergoing is not the end. This is only the beginning. Because now that you have recognized your rarity, genuine existence begins. Existence in which you no longer need to pretend. Existence in which your vitality can finally flow without obstacles. Existence in which your truth is your strength, not your burden. This existence will not be easy, but it will be yours. And that is the only thing that truly matters. If you feel that these words touch something within you, if you recognize in them your own silent experience, leave a comment below. You need not write extensively. A single word suffices to show that you are not alone in this quiet transformation. And if you wish to continue this journey together, subscribe to the channel, because we have much more to discover about the vitality you carry, about the strength you do not yet know, about what it truly means to live from your soul, not from a facade. This conversation is only beginning.